We can't anticipate what's coming either. We can't anticipate how the technology is going to change. We also have to look to federal and provincial regulations and laws and how that's going to impact our use of these technologies. And within our school board, Waterloo Catholic, we've developed guidelines, not policies, because it has to change as needed. And that's been really important to be extremely flexible and trying to emphasize too with our educators that we all need to be really flexible with this. Yes, we're telling you this right now, but next week this presentation will change. We did a ton of presentation in the spring to all of our staff, and each iteration, sometimes week to week, it was quite different. So that's very different than when, say, Chromebooks were rolled out, right? And it was like, here's your Chromebook. We're going to learn how to use this tool or a Google Doc, and you go, and it's going to be how it is, right? But this is very different.
This is the first time I've actually had more than one guest on the show. I'm really excited to do this. I'm going to have a few more of these kinds of conversations, but I'm excited to share with you these three women who I think are really leading a lot of the work, especially at the classroom application level. Katrina Gowett, Whitney McKinley, and Kirsten Thompson are my guests today. Katrina and Whitney hail from Waterloo Catholic in Ontario, and Kirsten is from Mountain View School Division in Manitoba. And I wanted to hear from them both because of their insights into generative AI, but more so into the ways in which our schools and school divisions are considering and embracing or being challenged by generative AI, especially from a systems level. I think in the work that I've done across Canada and the US, I've been fortunate to work with districts who are really thinking deeply about this, but I know that there are dozens and dozens more, maybe hundreds of more school districts across the continent who have not yet figured out or decided to try something or try to work towards an understanding of how these risks and possibilities are going to play out in their schools. And I think that's concerning because it's just a matter of time before the impact, if it hasn't already, hit classrooms and teachers. And so it's imperative, in my view, that leaders really try to gain an understanding and build towards something that's going to be equitable, that's going to include everyone, that's going to provide better learning outcomes. Great conversation that I have today with these three women. And again, I think we mentioned Katrina and Whitney's podcast, something that you'll want to listen to as well. So as you're listening, again, as I invite you, hit that subscribe button on Spotify or YouTube or Apple, wherever you listen to your podcast, and enjoy this conversation with the women of generative AI. How did you come to where you are now? So maybe thinking back to what was the moment where you thought, hey, this is a thing and I need to do something, and how you've come to where you are in terms of your own literacy. And I'm going to start with Kirsten. Kirsten is in Western Manitoba. And so Kirsten, just share a little bit about where you are and just how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I am in Mountain View School Division, and my role is coordinator of ICT. And so that portfolio within our division is quite large in the sense that if it's tied to ICT in any way, shape, or form, I get to have my hands on it in a little bit. And a part of that is really keeping abreast of the situation, and not just educational technology, but just technology in general, and the ways that our staff and our students can be using various tools in whatever their role might be. And so I'm already looking for new things, trying to follow along with the biggest and the best, and what's happening, and how can we adopt potential trends while still being as smart as possible. Because when it comes to teachers, I always want something to be sustainable. And so that's the other component of it as well. And sitting down at the end of November in 2022, and you see it come across X or Twitter, and ChatGPT is open to the public. I'm like, let's make an account, see what this is about. And of course, that snowballed from there quite quickly.
And then moving east to you listen, there's probably a lot of names. I'll call you the dynamic duo at this point. We come up some better we can, but anyway, Whitney and Katrina from Waterloo Catholic. An amazing podcast. If you want to listen to probably a better, more thoughtful I should say more thoughtful, but another podcast, that would be a good one. So Katrina, Whitney, do you want to just share a little bit about your role, and Kirsten, how you got to where you are today? You
I
decided.
think, yeah, when ChatGPT launched, Whitney and I were not in the same role, but we were across the hall from each other. And so we had lots of great conversations about it. And we did end up putting out a memo for our system about generative AI, very, excuse me, very general, and just make sure you're using it safely, that kind of thing. And then the following fall, Whitney joined into a position. We have the same position. And it became a real focus for us that we knew that we had to tackle this and make sure that our educators and most especially our students are going to be protected because generative AI is incredible. There is so much you can do with it. It's very powerful, but we don't want student information training the model or putting families and students at risk. So that was our big driving force, and also the potential to really alleviate educator burnout and just help with that piece. Whitney, you fill in the blanks now.
By the way, I do really like the dynamic duo. So maybe we should rename our podcast. Who knows?
Sure.
But the other part to really highlight for us when it comes to looking at our current focus is we are a Catholic system. And so we really wanted to think about generative AI and AI as a whole in a way of humans at the center. And I know we're seeing that theme come out over and over again, but it was really important to us to be thinking about this technology and, of course, the safety and all of the pieces that are important to our system, but really how we can keep humans at the center and make sure that everything that we do is very concrete in the way that, yes, this tool is going to be changing and things are going to be shifting extremely fast. And we're going to always feel like we need to catch up and catch up. But what we don't ever want to feel like we're catching up with is our ethics, the way that we communicate with other people, the way that we treat other people, and the way that we use these tools to highlight what's important to us. And so that's really been the focus for us. And then all of the other things have been the great domino that have come with it.
I like that. And it's interesting as any new idea emerges, language and becomes such an important thing. And I'm always worried that some language gets twisted and abused. So when you say human at the center, I really want that to stay the focus, because here's what I've also heard that I've been correcting people to say humans in the loop. And why I don't like that phrase is because it sounds like you're just on the outside watching it. Like I'm part of it, but center means, no, you are actually the most important piece. You're not just in the loop so I know what's going on. Like when I ask somebody to keep me in the loop, I don't feel like I'm in control. I'm just like, just tell me what's going on, but I'm not really in control. So I really love your focus on that. And again, in my experience, working with a number of other Catholic districts, the faith part of it does become a focus. And I think even in non-Catholic districts, I think the ethical piece and the idea that education is a human-centered experience should remain the focus. So I love that you're focusing on that. Let me just ask the three of you to think about, as you've done other work, you started this by saying we want to make sure people are safe. And Kirsten, you talked about your broad experience and applications of technology. How is this different from the things you've done before? Because you've all supported educational technology in one way, shape, or form. But November 2022, this technology is different. And again, I worry that people, well, I may talk about this more, say it's just a tool or whatever. And not really. This is different. So how is this different in terms of the way you are leading this and approaching it, and probably riffing on some of the things you've already discussed, but maybe expand on that a bit?
I know for me, this is the first experience where I've been in this role where I'm learning the tool while also training staff and students and community about the tool in real time. Any of our other large scale deployment plans. I feel like we were dealing with either software or hardware that had existed in some sort of publicly accessible way for quite a number of years. I could go to another school division, I could go to another organization and find information to pull from and get anecdotes on what worked, what didn't, and bring us up to speed in a way that made sense for our division. And with AI, it's changing so rapidly that we're trying to fly the plane while we're still building it, so to say.
No, I like that. And you're right in the sense that's where I think people are holding back because they're waiting until they feel maybe we need to be more comfortable before we lead it. So by jumping in, yes, you're being super vulnerable because, yeah, the thing I told you last week, that's no longer a thing anymore. So we've got to do something new. And it can come across as let's get our ducks in a row before we do it. But yeah, I'm not sure we have those options. Whitney or Katrina, what are your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I would agree. I think the change or the how fast things are evolving is just so completely different, and the way that they're changing, and we can't anticipate what's coming either. We can't anticipate how the technology is going to change. We also have to look to federal and provincial regulations and laws and how that's going to impact our use of these technologies. And within our school board, Waterloo Catholic, we've developed guidelines, not policies, because it has to change as needed. And that's been really important to be extremely flexible and trying to emphasize too with our educators that we all need to be really flexible with this. Yes, we're telling you this right now, but next week this presentation will change. We did a ton of presentation in the spring to all of our staff, and each iteration, sometimes week to week, it was quite different. So that's very different than when, say, Chromebooks were rolled out, right? And it was like, here's your Chromebook. We're going to learn how to use this tool or a Google Doc, and you go, and it's going to be how it is, right? But this is very different.
I also think a little bit that we are trying to land the plane without a plane. And so when it came to something like Chromebooks, we had Chromebooks. And there was funding that was given to purchase the technology. There was somebody who was in charge of rolling out that technology. Then we went and piloted, and it was the typical cycle of how to integrate technology into a classroom environment. In this case, we have a large number of our population who are already using these tools. And so we're in a situation where you accept it and you move on, or you really have no choice. We are moving, and that's the way it goes. And yeah, we might not have a plane, right? But what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we have a parachute. So we're going to make sure that we talked about ethics. We're going to make sure we talk about
Right.
safety. We're going to make sure that those things are never going to change, but the tool might.
Right.
But the way we log in might. Where the way we prompt, that'll be a little different depending on what we're doing. And so we're really looking at that's different than anything we've done before. We're doing things without funding. We're doing things without some guidance. We're doing things without being able to tap on one another, but we're figuring out how to do it with still keeping the humans who we are so fortunate to be entrusted with, keeping them safe.
Yeah, it was a couple things, Whitney, and that you both shared that I was thinking about. Like one, that idea of there's no landing pad here. So what's happening across everywhere is in most cases, and this is something that in the work I've been doing, we've been telling districts to be cautious in terms of don't go out and spend a bunch of money on tools. Let's keep figuring it out. And yes, at the same time, we know that people are using them in sort of their own ways. And okay, that's fine. And that can be useful. Take that learning from there. But in terms of a organization stamp on it, now there have been some, we have worked with some who have said, okay, we're going to start with these few tools so that now at least for those folks, they have something so we're going to learn together using, which is a little bit more the traditional way in which we've rolled out technology is we have a common tool, common platform that we work on and move it. So, but most aren't quite ready to make that call yet. And I certainly value both of those perspectives. The other thing I think that's fascinating in this journey is, I would say, the lack of leadership at the provincial level. So I believe right now the only two provinces that have actually done any kind of work is British Columbia and New Brunswick. I know that now Manitoba, I feel, should be next up to, and largely just because of their new government is probably a little bit more receptive to these conversations. And I know I'm talking with a number of Manitoba superintendents who feel hopeful that's the case. But it puts you in a little bit of a challenge, right? Because a lot of those guidelines, which again, I'm glad you didn't say policy, and nobody likes, no, very people are very afraid of policy because it definitely more rigid. But people are looking for leaders. That's where they're at. Who's going to lead us right now? And oftentimes we have looked to ministries, and I don't know that they're in a position either interested or capable of doing it. So again, this is where individuals and school boards like yourselves, I think, are really important in that one. So I don't know if you have any want to follow up on that thought at all, how you feel about that.
Yeah, it's always hard, especially when we're so passionate about what we do and we really would love things to move faster than maybe they do. We are grateful. We've been invited on quite a few conversations with the Ontario Ministry of Education and some of the work that they're looking to. Hopefully, in the near future, Ontario will be in your list there. And our voices have been considered quite a few times in those conversations. So we're very fortunate and grateful to have been a part of some of those conversations. And we have something to look forward to in the future.
I was going to agree with that. On the Manitoba side, the conversations are occurring. And similar to you, I've had an opportunity to work with the Ministry of Education in Manitoba, and one of our provincial organizations, MADL, which is a Manitoba Association of Educational Technology Leaders. We've been invited to the table to work on some of the new ICT curriculums within Manitoba and the approaches. And so this is encompassed within that. I agree, the timeline does not always match what works with tech. And of course, as soon as you publish anything in the tech world, it is outdated immediately. But what I've really appreciated about the conversation with AI is, from my bias, that we don't necessarily have to be creating new guidelines. It's more cross-referencing to existing guidelines. I don't know if you two would agree, but there hasn't been a major AI concern that's been brought up to me that I can't find in an existing policy or procedure somewhere else. It will tie back to code of conduct, to intellectual property, to assessment ethics, to confidentiality, to student data privacy. We all have them, but it's making that network to connect them all together. And I like that AI is bringing some of those things to the forefront so we can remind people that, hey, these exist and they have for a really long time,
Right.
and be more mindful of them.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great point. And I think, yeah, like all of the guidelines I've seen, and Australia was one of the first countries to come out with their framework and so forth. They're very similar. Just the most mission statements in any school district around the world are pretty similar. However, I guess as long as, and I'm encouraged to hear, and I'm not surprised that ministries of education in your provinces are inviting you all to the table because you're leading the work. And that's the really critical part. Everybody just needs to wrestle with the conversations. The ethics conversations, they're hard. They're not simple. It's not, oh, here's the guideline. You need to engage in, wait a minute. What about this? What about that? And I think that's the part that I'm encouraging people to go through productive struggle around some of this stuff. I was in a high school in Surrey on Friday, high school teachers, and high school teachers are probably the most vulnerable at the moment because of just the way high school is structured and concerns about plagiarism and so forth. And how should kids use it? Should kids not? All those things. And I just say, I don't know all the answers to those questions, and nobody does. But I think it's certainly worth exploring. And in my head, I haven't landed on exactly how it should be used in a classroom. I don't know yet. And I'm still working it out. And I'm teaching right now a grad class. So I'm really excited to see where this lands, but I don't know. And that's why I keep wanting to have conversations with people. I learn a little bit more each time around, oh, that's a really good way of framing it, structuring it. This is a rich conversation that I'm so grateful that the three of you are helping to lead in where the places you serve. Let's talk a little bit about the exciting. Now, I think it was Katrina, you mentioned how this might address the notion of burnout. And again, I'm curious about that. I'm curious about where that might fit. But so I'll start with you, Katrina, around what are some of the, let's talk about the positive side. What are some of the exciting things that you've seen around? There's potential here for really interesting work to be done with humans at the center. So what are you seeing there, Katrina, around that burnout conversation?
Yeah, I think it can just really help with our workflow. It helps with my workflow every day. I think it can really help with educators' workflow. And going to when we educate educators about how to use AI and directing them, go to our ministry documents, pull out that curriculum expectation that you're trying to tackle. And then right now we're doing a lot of talk around UDL and having a more robust implementation in our board. So how can you take that curriculum expectation and come up with some great ideas to address the needs in your classroom in a whole bunch of different ways rather than trying to come up with them all on your own, right? Or maybe with the teacher next to you. It'll give you a good first draft so that it's doing that heavy lifting, and then you can use your professional judgment to determine what's going to work best in my classroom. I think that it can do a good job of giving us a little bit of feedback on my lesson didn't go great. Here's what I did. What could I try differently next time? I think helping with self-reflection as an educator, it could be a great tool to use if we decide to utilize it in that way. Again, helping write those newsletters to parents, those communication tasks that are so essential in the classroom to make sure that our communities, our parents and the guardians of the students in our room are up to date on what's going on. AI can really help us with those drafts because that can take a lot of time. All of those pieces, I think, are really helpful for educators. Same with synthesizing a couple documents together. I know I've used that quite a bit in the past few months where I take our Ontario Catholic graduate expectations and I synthesize it with our transferable skills and our multi-year strategic plan. And it can really help me align some of those pieces that would have taken me like incredible hours to do myself. So I really appreciate leveraging AI in that way and seeing what educators can do to help them leverage it.
Kirsten, what about you? What are the things that you most in these early days?
I'm most excited just about the time saving. And we already spoke to this a little bit, but when I go in, regardless of what type of tech training I'm doing with my staff, I always tell them, I'm like, I'm here to try and get you to have your life be a little bit easier and have certain tasks go a little bit faster. What they do with that beyond them is completely up to them. But AI has just put that on steroids. There's so much that are added to teachers' plates. And I think every teacher can say, I have my curriculum, I have my school plan, I have my divisional plan, I have what the province is asking me to report on. And then we have whether it's UDL or Seven Habits by Stephen Covey or Indigenous language frameworks or X and X getting added on top of it. And like you said, put in these public facing documents, put them into an AI tool. I have this. How can I combine these? And the time saved and the connections that are made, I think are just so incredibly valuable. Or even just putting in something that in your mind is tried and true and just saying, hey, what are the gaps? Because we always know that there's people that we're not reaching, whether they're youth learners or adult learners, but we live and breathe in our world. And it's really hard for us to step back sometimes and be like, why aren't people getting this?
Great.
Putting in, say, what are the gaps? And just being able to have those types of mindsets shared with you is so incredibly valuable, I think. It's really exciting.
Yeah, that thought partner concept is really interesting. And then thinking about what does that actually mean? Like, how much thought do I want to abdicate to something else? And how much thought I mean, again, that's where the complexity of this conversation stands in, but I can attest to it. And the time saving one, again, I think That's really concrete. And in a world of data, that's going to be interesting to start tracking that if people, because people will, and I know they've told you that you've experienced this saved me 30 minutes, right? If you can accurately say something save you 30 minutes, like that's amazing. The second part for me though, is just the reduction of anxiety that I have when I have to plan something that like, I know I can do this and I've done it. I also don't know where to start. And I'm also not sure I've got the whole thing. So if it can accelerate me to, yeah, I think I've got this now. Now I can invest my own creativity and insights to make it mine, to make it better. But I've reached that threshold of like just this thing that I'm planning for that I'm not 100% sure I'm there. So having a thought partner that can get you there, that's amazing. Whitney, what about you? What excites you?
I've never had the experience before in my job where it's been something that has affected my whole world, right? Usually it's we do something and it affects our work world and nothing. And then we do something and that affects our students but for me, it's been something that's affected everything. And again, in a positive way, but like I use generative AI to plan my weekly grocery shopping. I use it. My kids are really involved in sports and they help me figure out who goes where and who drives where and all those things. So that cognitive load that used to be where I felt I was pulled in so many different directions. Now I get to be pulled in the direction of snuggling my kids, right? I get to be pulled in the direction of nobody is asking me what we're having for dinner anymore. We know what it is. And that is really exciting for me because we can bring this into our work and we can work with teachers and say, how is this going to help you with your workload? How is this going to help you lesson planning? All of those pieces. But then as the educators make those connections, hey, could I use this to dot, dot, dot? And you just help them with that more human element that it doesn't become so we're ticking this box. You need to know this thing. How did you apply it? Away you go. But there's so many possibilities, and there's so many possibilities that are free. It used to be that we had to touch on all these things, but it meant, okay, you're paying for this app. Well, what do you have but there's possibilities for everyone. And that is really exciting to me that we are conscious of the digital divide. We are conscious of the fact that we need to have these opportunities for all of our students, no matter who they are, where they are. But then we also have these opportunities for our teachers. And we also have these opportunities for our teachers as people. And that really excites me.
Well, I love that. Thank you for calling that out because I think this is one of these very few things in education that really impacts everyone. And we've had the good pleasure of working with operations peoples, that side of school boards, right? Listen, I don't know a thing about HR or finance. You do. Here's what this could do. How might this start helping them make connections? But Whitney, your call out of the personal side, I always tell people like, listen, totally inconsequential. Plan a meal plan, your workout plan, your trip, whatever it is. Like it doesn't matter because I'm going to ask you about some of the challenges. But at that point, this is a way to play with this thing. And then you're starting and you'll figure out the connection pretty quickly to your professional life. But we hosted a parent night last week in British Columbia, had 600 parents show up. And the neat part about that is like the goal was there just to let parents know as a school district, we got your kid covered. Like we are thinking about this. We're going to make sure they're safe. We're going to make sure we're ticking all the boxes. Don't worry. We got you. That was the message. Parents, though, half of them were there, not because they were worried about how the school district was going to support AI, because they want to learn about themselves. Like they said, can you help me understand this more? So there is a curiosity on their side to say, I've heard of this thing, but no, I don't have anybody to help me think through it. So they want to learn. So the opportunity of parents learning alongside with kids, for educators as humans, for all the people that don't work directly with teaching and learning, it's bringing us all together to have these really rich conversations and learning with and from one another, right? That part of it to me is really exciting that this actually can bring everybody together having very similar conversation. But as we all know, this is not all rainbows and unicorns. This episode is brought to you by Advanced Learning Partnerships, also known as ALP. We are a professional learning consulting group that serves communities across North America. We are partners, designers, and agents for change. You can learn more about the work we do at alplearn.com. And now back to the show. There's some real challenges. So when you think about whether it's immediate challenges, things you're hearing, what are the things that kind of really are top of mind for you as I want to make sure people get, here's where this can go really bad really quickly. Whitney, I'll start with you.
For us, obviously, we talked about it before, the ethics behind it, the privacy behind it, and the fact that there are so many free tools, which are really exciting, but it's about the guidance of how do we make sure that we're using the tools in an ethical, safe way that keeps our students' privacy, security, and information at the center of everything, and that we are keeping them safe. Again, we're really trying to get that word out. But if we could have a PD day where we get to talk to the whole entire staff, or if we could release teachers from their classrooms to do some professional development so they could really understand how these tools work, it would be fantastic. We don't have that opportunity right now. We don't have that privilege right now. So the real challenge has been, yes, these tools are shiny. Yes, these tools are really fun. They can do a lot of really amazing things, but really highlighting the need to keep our students protected and knowing that we have done our best to put that word out, but really trying to get educators to understand why that's so important. When you don't know necessarily how these LLMs work and how it's collecting your information and how it's training the model and all those things, we can say that, but until you actually experience and learn a little bit more and get that AI literacy, that's been a really big challenge for us. Now, thankfully, we haven't gotten to a situation where we have to deal with anything in particular, but we would like to not ever have to come to that situation.
Kirsten, what about you?
I think she did a fantastic summary, but yeah, this is the first opportunity that we have had to introduce a software, introduce a tool where we're not just having to educate on how to navigate the tools, but we're essentially providing computer science degrees on how the tool is functioning in the back end. And I can't think of another example of when we actually did that. Because in order to understand the ethics, in order to understand why it is so important that we are only inputting certain data sources, you really have to understand how it was trained, how it's going to be used, where the data is going. And I just can't think of another example when we've ever had to do that before. And so that has been the most challenging part, because then when you try and couple how that works with Canadian legislation and then provincial legislation around student intellectual property and student data, when a lot of these AI softwares are coming from outside of Canada and they're advertising, use it for this, use it for this, use it for this. And then you're like, wait, if you pull up our guidelines, if you pull up student intellectual property mandates, that doesn't work here in Canada. And it's super confusing for staff.
Yeah. No, and both of you raise this idea of the challenge of AI literacy, right? Like, how do you get people to understand kind of those basics? And Kirsten, lifting underneath the hood to see how this works, not necessarily because we're trying to create computer science, but because you do have to understand how this works. And the reason why that's such a critical thing is because without it, you use these tools, and it's the same with Alexa and Siri. The anthropomorphism of these tools is so prevalent. And and I say kids, but adults too, think of these as they're actual just humans because of that, because that's actually how you get the most value out of them. You treat them like a human. And yet that's very creepy. And I think something that we have to understand the line between, these are machines. These are not people. We have to control it. Don't give them that kind of agency over you to think of we all know the stories of where it's gone. That's happened. But I think that's a big part of it. So I'm glad you highlighted that part of the ongoing literacy around this. To understand this, you actually have to take control of this. You have to be at the center of this, and don't let companies, as you've described. We know a few companies that have the word magic in in their title. It's not magic. It isn't magic. You can understand this at the level you need to understand this so that the ethical considerations are placed. Katrina, what would you add to that in terms of things that you're challenged by in this conversation?
I think it's actually quite a challenge that we can't be experts in this, that there is just too much to know. And I feel like I live, breathe, eat AI by listening and reading and all of the things. I can't become an expert. And so then it really requires a whole lot of communication and connection with other people who have expertise in certain areas, whether that be the classroom teacher who's actually like in the ground floor working on it with their students, or the PhD student at University of Waterloo who we talk about, like we've talked with before, and we learn new things that we didn't know how the tool works. And so I think that takes an enormous amount of time and energy that is really rewarding, but it's very intentional, and we have to work really hard at it so that we can try and have as much information as we can to equip our community with as much as we can so that
Yeah.
they're safe
Well,
and using it wisely.
thank you for calling that out again, because I'm always, people say they'll introduce me as an expert. And I just say, no, do not put that label on me. I am not an expert. I'm learning. I'm a little bit ahead of you just because I've given more time and energy to learning about it. But we know Sam Altman and others have already said themselves, we don't even really know how this works. There's that part of it. So I think, again, what you're pointing to, Katrina, is a community of people working together. We need to work with one another and learn with and from each other as new things emerge and new perspectives come. So this is just, to me, it advocates for a community approach, which is why my favorite work that I've done so far is in British Columbia, because I've got 12 districts working together, learning side by side along this. Because I think this isn't a great thing just to do by yourself, because no one person has it all. So I appreciate that. What a great conversation. I'm gonna transition a little bit, just talking about broadly speaking your leadership journey. And again, that's the name of the show, the Canadian Ed Leadership Show. I'd love for you to just think of a leadership lesson that you've learned, and it could be around generative AI, but maybe not, just in general, with your role. And as women, you bring a certain perspective to this as well that maybe I certainly don't have, but I don't know who wants. I'll just let whoever wants to jump in first, just to share just a leadership challenge you faced along the way and kind of your journey as leaders.
I think I'll start. I think it goes back to I only know what I know, and I can't know more unless I talk to other people. And I can't assume this is a tough one for me sometimes. I can't assume what I think other people know or that they know what is happening. So I think the communication has really been the most crucial in my own personal leadership development. And communication is not easy. It is a challenge every day, from the emails we write to the phone calls we make to the people we see in person, and trying to foster a positive relationship with people and build on that. I think that's my biggest takeaway, and something I will be working on for my entire lifetime. I don't think I'm ever going to be a communications expert, but it's something I will always be working on.
I really like that you had mentioned that you don't want to be introduced as an expert. And anytime I ever hear that type of phrasing as well, I always say, I'm a learning expert. That's really what I would consider myself an expert in. There's not an end destination. And I think when we're talking about AI specifically and leadership, I think it's been an excellent opportunity to revisit leadership as a service mindset, and that I'm on the ground with you. I'm trying to help out. I'm figuring this out alongside you. It's not a hierarchy, and I'm not sharing things, top down or bottom up or whatever direction you want to go, but we're on this journey together. And I think with AI being so new in its current form and it changing so rapidly, having to stay alongside the people that I am helping to support helps me reframe who I am as a leader, just in general.
That's a very Canadian thing to say, Kirsten. And I know that working with so many Americans who really, and it's interesting though, because I tend to be probably like you, downplay a lot of the things that I do and know. And I've been told sometimes don't downplay so much. You have to figure out, again, I'm with you exactly that framing, but at the same time, the three of you already have people who look up to you because of that. So I guess we're trying to figure out, what am I going to own? I love the fact you're owning. I'm a learning expert. I will put that front and center for you. But the part where I'm not an expert is here. So that's the good call out. Yeah. Own your expertise and own your strengths and let people know that, but I'm still working on it. Whitney, what about you? What's a challenge in leadership that you overcome or you think about a lot?
Yeah, you can. I bet you if you ask Katrina, she could say the line that I use on a daily basis. I'm a huge Brene Brown fan, but so the talk less, listen more. And I've really come in my experience with working with others, but it applies so much to our work on AI in that you think you've learned something. And if you stopped right there and didn't take time to listen to what other people are saying, listen to the lived experience of the teacher on the ground floor, like Katrina said, or listen to the experience of the students, or listen to the experience of the news, or it's coming at us from all angles. And if we didn't take a moment to just stop, listen, and then see what really fits, then we would be doing a huge disservice to our system. And really, when in all that we do, everybody brings a lived experience, everybody brings something that's important to them. And that might not always align with what's important to me. But if I don't take the time to talk less and listen more, I'll never be able to be that learner. Whether it's from AI, whether it's from the people I work with, it really doesn't matter. And even sometimes we'll go for walks at lunch and just not talk so we can listen to what's going on around us. And that to me has been the biggest lesson. I do like to talk, so it is a challenge. But I think it's something that has helped for sure.
You might say you do like to talk, but I don't know if this is a male thing. I'm really bad. Tells me this all the time. Like, I need to listen better. So this is an ongoing challenge for me. But thanks again for calling that one out. All right, my favorite part of my podcast that I've added probably for the last 25 or 30 episodes is asking people to name one person they're grateful for. So the idea behind this is to pick somebody who actually might listen to this podcast and hear their name get shout out. And you have to be specific. Like, you can't say, oh, it's all the people in my life. Yeah, I get it. You have a billion people you can be thankful for sure. You got to name one today, just one. So I'll let whoever is comfortable go first.
I get to go first. I've decided. Thanks, everybody. Talk less, listen more. Now I'm going to talk more and not listen. But the reason that I want to go first is because I can genuinely say my person is in our podcast, and Katrina really is my person. We are so fortunate. When you're in a leadership position, sometimes it can feel very lonely. Sometimes it can feel like you're trying to navigate so many things and so many pieces, and things get missed, right? You can't get to everybody. But I really do feel that I am able to be a better leader. I'm able to be a better human. I'm able to be a better wife and mother and all those things because Katrina is my other half. And so if I drop the ball on something, she'll help me out with it. If I need support with something, she'll be there to help me out with it. And I really do wish for everybody that they get to have leadership in pairs. Often we need our leaders to be by themselves for whatever reason. And I think that's a huge mistake. Leadership in pairs, leadership in numbers is so effective and really exciting.
You're gonna make me cry, Whitney. And also, I knew you were going to say that, and I was going to pick you. So I'll just mirror that back to you. And maybe I'll give a shout out on both of our behalf for our superintendent, Judy Merkel, because she really is a wonderful leader that we really rely on. She gives us a lot of great advice, but then also she is a good listener. And we really appreciate her leadership in giving us freedom to push forward in some of these big projects, like with AI. The AI work that we've done at Waterloo Catholic would not be possible without having Judy as our supervisor. And we're really grateful for that.
Awesome.
There's so much love happening in this podcast right now. This makes me feel really happy. I want to give a shout out to a longtime friend and colleague, Andy McKeel. And Andy has run alongside me in different spheres for a number of years, ever since I was a pre-service teacher, and has been one of those people that has just constantly said, hey, what you're doing has value. I hear you. You should keep going. There's people supporting you. And I know that is not unique to me. I know that he provides that support to so many people across the province and beyond. And has just been one of those people, not only in education, but in educational technology, that I feel strengthens our collective capacity just because he helps to encourage everybody so much and bring out the best in everybody.
What a wonderful call out. I know Andy really well. And in fact, here's a great Andy story. In 2010, I won the ISTE Outstanding Leader of the Year award, which sounds like a big deal. And for those at ISTE, it is. But the reason I won that award is because of Andy. Andy nominated me. I was in Saskatchewan. That's where I am. He's in Manitoba, and Manitoba has their ISTE affiliate, but he decided to nominate me. I'm not even from his province, and he nominated me, whatever. And that's how I got this award. So that's the kind of person that Andy is. He's just looking to highlight other people. He's such a humble but powerful leader. And I've had a chance to talk to Judy once as well. So it sounds like there's some of those characteristics are there. These are good listeners, and these are people that just want the best of those that they serve. So great call outs. Thank you for those. All right. Just as we wrap up a little bit, sort of rapid fire ish, I'm wondering what each of you are reading, and all of these, we're all podcast listeners. It could be podcasts too. So just give me one thing you're reading or listening to. And I'm thinking more on the sort of professional side of things. So let's pique your curiosity. Kirsten's reaching for a book, but you go ahead, Katrina.
Okay, a podcast I listen to almost every day is called the AI Daily Brief with Nathan Whitmore. And I like that one just because it gives me the business side on AI and like a lot of updates that in a nice format. So I like that one.
AI Daily Brief.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Kirsten, what do you got in your hand?
My current book is Co-Intelligence, and I'm almost finished. So Co-Intelligence, Living and Working with AI by Ethan Mollick. Also very prolific on social media. So if you can't necessarily catch the book, can follow on Twitter or X or LinkedIn, and just so many good things behind the scenes happening in AI.
So that book is on my list, along with Katrina and Whitney, about people or things to follow. But I know the tip because this is the tip I didn't know, is I have Spotify Premium, so I got to listen to that book for free. So if you have
There we
Spotify
go.
Premium, that all books are free. So I listened to that one. The only thing I would say, this is my only critique of the book. I thought it was an amazing book. I didn't think his take on education was that great, but that's just a little thing. But I thought the living part was outstanding, but that part was my sort of only critique. Anyways, Whitney, what do you got?
Yeah, I just finished. I know I still have a lot of life left to live, but it is probably going to be in one of my top 10s. It's called Weapons of Math Destruction. If you haven't read it, it is an amazing book that had me gasping many a times. But it's the behind the scenes of the way that algorithms are shaping our life, whether we know that they are or not. Some of them in a really positive way, some of them in an extremely negative way. But it's hard to sell people on a book about algorithms. This one, highly recommend.
Okay, Weapons of Math Destruction. Who's it by?
It's by Kathy O'Neill.
Okay, that one sounds interesting to me. All right, but now when you're not fussing about AI all the day and you just want to say, okay, my mind needs to just decompress here. What might you be? And again, maybe it's reading, maybe it's watching. I don't know. I go to the streaming thing to hear what people are watching, mostly because then I get recommendations, but could be guilty pleasure, but maybe it's something super sophisticated too. I don't know. What do you like to watch when you have time, Katrina?
When I need my brain to melt down a little bit, I watch Below Deck. I am a big Below Deck fan. I don't watch reality shows except for Below Deck. So,
Okay.
yeah.
I like it. I like it.
Mhm.
I am working my way through Parks and Rec for the first time. I've had it on my list forever, and I'm
Nice.
finally getting around to it and loving it.
Nice.
That is a great one. You know what? I do not stream or watch a whole lot of anything, but if I am watching something, it's probably going to be the Cowboys game, some sort of sport, something. That's
Yeah.
all that's on in my house. And so that's what we do. We're a big sports family.
Nice. I'm with you on that too. Great. All right. So part of the show, again, is to introduce people to wonderful Canadian leaders across Canada, but also I always like the geography side of it too. What I'm asking you is each of you to pick one place in the region you live. It could be a restaurant, it could be a park, but probably something that like people might not come across if they did a quick Google search. But just this is a place people should check out. So what's your local place for people to check out when they were to come visit you in your part of the world?
I live in the very small village of Ayr, Ontario, which is west of Cambridge, south of Kitchener. And I just really love our downtown. It's really sweet. It's some historic buildings, and there's a pond and benches and a little woods that you
Love
can
it.
take a trail through. So I love spending time there, either by myself, going for a walk, or taking my kids there. So
So
that's what I
last
love.
year, was it last year? Yeah, last year we did a little fall trip and drove up to it's Elora and what's the other little
Yes.
town? Fergus,
Yeah.
is it? Fergus?
Fergus. Yeah.
Where are you in relation? Because that was the vibe I got from those little towns.
Yeah.
Where are you? Were
Oh,
you south
yeah.
of that?
Alora is beautiful. Yeah, I'm about probably 40, maybe an hour, 45 to an hour from there, and southwest, I would
Okay.
say. Mhm.
Okay. Cool.
So I'm located along the north side of Riding Mountain National Park, which is absolutely beautiful in its own right. But right outside the park, nestled right against the park line, is what's called the North Gate Trail Systems. And it is a fantastic resource in our community. It is 26 kilometers of multi use trails, mountain biking,
Mountain.
hiking, snowshoeing. And it's just been put together by a group of volunteers that have done absolutely phenomenal work. And I feel like it is such a hidden gem. We have friends that have visited from Calgary, visited from British Columbia, and they're like, I can't believe that you have trails like this in Manitoba. So
Lovely.
definitely check it out if that's your vibe.
I will.
I'm having a very hard time picking something, but okay, one of my favorite places, it is about 40 minutes from me here in Waterloo, but in Cambridge, we have a beautiful restaurant. It's a 1920s building that was renovated. It's called EVO Kitchen. I think it's one of the greatest places to eat. And if you are in this area, then you should come by. But then my other like top I have to say is if you are in Waterloo region in October, if you don't hit up Oktoberfest, then you are fully missing out. I know
What are
it's
you
not
even doing?
number
What are you
one.
even doing?
I know it's not number one, but we're close second.
Oh, those are fantastic. Listen, ladies, this was a delight for me to get the three of you together. And again, if people aren't following each of you and you're very easy to find online doing all kinds of great things, they really ought to because I really appreciate the work that all three of you are doing, trying to get this conversation going and in the right direction, which I know you all are. So thank you so much for your time and sharing today. I really appreciate it. And I hope our paths cross and we keep doing stuff and learning with it. Well, we will, but maybe even in a more intentional way. So thank you, ladies, for your time today.
Thanks for having us. It's such a
Thanks
great
for listening.
conversation.
All right. Take good care.